This is CounterPoint, and I'm your host, Tanya Granic Allen. As the midterms are approaching, the political temperature in the United States is rising once again, with President Trump's influence over the Republican Party, tensions with key allies like Canada, and a renewed focus on trade tariffs and China all shaping the debate. At the same time, questions about foreign policy from Iran and Israel to high profile cases like Jimmy Lai are testing how far economic interests can be separated from values on the global stage. And then there's the $1.8 billion anti-weaponization slush fund, which was part of a controversial settlement of Trump's $10 billion civil suit against the Internal Revenue Service over the 2019 leak of his tax returns by a former contractor. Critics fear that this money will go to Trump loyalists, but recently a federal judge temporarily blocked it. So, what happens in Washington over the coming months will not only determine the balance of power in Congress, but also set the tone for America's relationships with its closest partners, including Canada, at a moment when the CUSMA agreement is headed toward a critical review. Closer to home, Canadian policymakers are watching these developments closely, particularly as uncertainty around tariffs, supply chains, and energy cooperation continues to ripple across North American industries. The intersection of domestic U.S. politics and international strategy is becoming harder to separate, especially as global competition with China intensifies and both countries reassess their economic and security priorities. Well, to help us make sense of it all, I'm joined by Peter Roff. Peter is contributing editor for Newsweek Magazine. Peter, always a pleasure having you. Thanks for being here.
Morning, Tanya. Good to be with you.
Excellent. So let's start off the bat. We know the midterms are approaching. It'll be a critical election. How much is Trump still shaping the direction of the Republican Party? And what are your predictions of what we can expect at the midterms?
Trump isn't just shaping the direction of the Republican Party. Trump is shaping the political direction of the country. The Democrats don't have an agenda for America. They have a message that says, put us in power to stop Trump. And every special election that they've won over the last 2 years, since the president re-entered the White House, year and a half, has been based on help us send a message to stop Trump. So he is the defining figure in American politics for both parties. He's not, I think, doing his best work articulating what it is that he's doing to, as he puts it, make America great again right now. I think that he's tied up with the war in Iran, which I think is the right war at the right time. But again, he's failed to articulate persuasively to the American people just why that's the case. But he is the dominant figure for both parties. He sets the agenda, and you're either with him or you're against him.
Now, speak of those who are against him, we've seen in some of the primaries for congressional races, et cetera, for example, like Thomas Massey, that those who actively campaign against him will face a consequence. You're not with him, you're against him.
Well, that he's selective in who he chooses to take on, but yeah, his one-loss record in terms of taking on his political opponents is about as good as any other politician in either party that I've ever seen. When he wants you gone, it's a pretty safe bet you're going to be going one way or another.
Okay, and then the $1.8 billion anti-weaponization slush fund controversy, whatever you want to call it. Do you think that will help or hinder him as he heads into the midterms?
That hurt him, which is one of the reasons that the Attorney General Todd Blanche says that it's been set aside, that it's not going to continue. That he won't say it was a bad idea, but it seems to me that they've concluded that the risks, the political damage, not worth the cost, and that's unfortunate because there were a lot of people, some of whom are friends of mine, who were targeted by the Justice Department or the IRS because they were Trump associates
Okay, I'm going to
or
pause you
Trump
there.
supporters.
I want to pick up this up right when we come back from this commercial break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Counterpoint. We're unpacking the U.S. political scene and how it's seen internationally and what President Trump is doing right and wrong as he heads into the midterms. And joining me for that discussion is Peter Roff, contributing editor for Newsweek Magazine. Peter, just before we cut to commercial break, we were discussing this $1.8 billion anti-weaponization fund. Some people called it a slush fund. But to be clear, there was first of all, there was a lawsuit brought against by Trump against the IRS for revealing inappropriately his tax records and some of his filings. So I think, if it's illegal, that's right.
Okay. But let's be real clear about this, Tara. Release for anyone at the IRS, an IRS employee or a contractor, to release a private individual's tax return is a crime.
Absolutely.
It's not just a oh, we frown upon that. It's a crime that's supposed to be punishable by sending people to jail. Now, the guy who was fingered as the leaker didn't get jail time. This whole thing has been treated far too lightly because, again, there's this huge culture of people who think that if it involves Donald Trump, it doesn't matter if what
Right.
you do in opposition to his policies is against the law. Trump is so odious that all bets are off and anything's on the table. And that reaction to Trump is, in my mind, far worse than anything Trump himself has done or has tried to do. Now, as far as this weaponization fund is concerned, there are a lot of people out there, some of whom are, as I said, are friends of mine, who, because they were Trump supporters or Trump associates, got subpoenaed, got investigated, and had to spend an awful lot of money to either keep themselves out of jail or negotiate some kind of settlement with the government. And this was political targeting.
It totally was.
Pure and
Totally.
simple. Pure and simple. And political targeting, this is not the first time that Democrats have targeted their opponents using the power of the government. Lyndon Johnson did it. Jack Kennedy did it. FDR was famous for doing it. Obama did it. And I think the historical record will show that Biden did it. These people deserve to have their day in court. The problem, of course, as I think most people now recognize, is that you can't have the person who's suing control both halves of the settlement, which is in effect what happened.
Exactly. That was the big crux of the problem.
Private citizen Donald Trump sues the IRS, and then President Donald Trump, his administration, produces a settlement of private citizen Trump's complaint. And there's nobody out there. I mean, I'm surprised that there wasn't somebody in the White House who said, wait a minute, guys, this won't fly. This isn't right. I mean, this needs to be held in abeyance until the next administration, Democrat or Republican.
Right.
We can't settle a suit that we brought.
Right. It makes sense. And I do, by the way, criminal behavior is criminal behavior. And I do think there's, at least in my opinion, what I've observed, there seems to be a double standard when it comes to applying the law in many circumstances, this one in particular. Let's shift gears to Canada. We know the USMCA, the CUSMA agreement's up for negotiation. The United States, Trump is already dealing at present bilaterally with Mexico to get their deal done. What about Canada? Do you think Ottawa, Canada, is dealing more with a transactional Trump this time around when it comes to trade? What do you see as some of the hindrances to getting a deal done with Canada?
Well, unfortunately, I think your prime minister is part of that coterie of Democratic leaders who think the highest, best purpose that they can bring to the table is to screw Trump. I'd throw in there Prime Minister Starmer of England, President Macron of France, the leaders of Spain, Belgium, Holland, Germany. They're not interested in transactional negotiations. They're actually not interested, as is shown by their attitude towards the Iranian seizure of the Strait of Hormuz.
Welcome back to Counterpoint. Again, we're unpacking U.S. politics and tensions as they're arising globally and how that may impact the U.S. midterms and Canada, especially as we enter renegotiations for CUSMA. And joining me again is Peter Roff, contributing editor for Newsweek Magazine. Peter, let's shift gears now to Iran. This has been an issue that I think has kind of boiled over and has continued on longer than most of the world had expected, probably perhaps even the United States. Um, what do you see is the role of the United States in this conflict? And will there be a resolve? Is it even possible to negotiate a deal with Iran?
Okay, let's start with the role of the United States. And this is what President Trump has, in my mind, failed to clearly articulate and persuade the American people. The United States is the defender of Western civilization. The current regime in Tehran is the successor to the people who hijacked a popular revolution in 1979. They seized control of it. They're religious fanatics. They have a messianic outlook, and they are interested in the acquisition of nuclear weapons. Despite what they say, everything they do suggests to the contrary. They want nuclear weapons so that they can reestablish the caliphate and control all the territory between Tehran and Mecca. They have ballistic missiles that can reach Europe. We now know this. We didn't know this when the war started, but we now know this. Mm-hmm. And various senior Iranian officials have time and again threatened to rain fire down from the sky. They are not seeking nuclear weapons as some kind of power sharing or balance of power effort against the Israelis or the Pakistanis, Pakistan being the only officially Muslim country that has a nuclear weapon right now. They're seeking a nuclear weapon so they can wage war on their political and theological enemies. Donald Trump is trying to keep them from getting a nuclear weapon, from being able to build a nuclear weapon or weapons. Most international scientific monitoring groups say that at 60% enrichment, Iran is 90 days away from having the fuel to put into a bomb that works. And you can get the plans for a bomb on the internet now. The hard part isn't figuring out how to build it. It's acquiring the materials you need. So he is the savior of Western civilization.
Okay, then
He
a question,
has not.
Sorry to interject, but knowing that Iran's capabilities, because they did recently fire a ballistic missile, and we know they can hit Western Europe now. Why is Western Europe not allying more with Trump on this file? I mean, it's not America. Well, I mean, America in a grand scale, yes, it's at risk, but immediate threat is Western Europe. So why aren't they walking and marching lockstep with Trump?
I think there are a couple of reasons. I think one of them is the animosity that they feel towards Trump. This is particularly true in Britain, where you have a hard left Labour government that is, by the way, failing. Starmer can't seem to be getting in bed with Trump on anything. Neither can Macron. Even the moderately conservative German chancellor can't be seen as getting in bed with Trump, because the international left has so thoroughly poisoned the water where Trump is concerned that doing a deal with Trump is like doing a deal with Hitler, literally.
Wow.
According to people who write for reputable organs like the New York Times, who compare, people make this comparison all the time. It's invalid, but they make it, and I'm sure that there are people on the left that believe it. So that's the first reason. The second reason is that the number of Muslims who have emigrated to Western Europe is extremely large, and you are seeing in places like Britain Muslim on British violence. I think that in Britain, in France, in Germany, they are afraid that openly taking sides against Iran may add to the domestic chaos each of the countries face.
Welcome back to CounterPoint. We're discussing the U.S. politics and how the U.S. is seen and how their actions are perceived globally, especially as they head into the midterm elections, and what actions recently Donald Trump has taken can impact the world geopolitically. Again, joining me is Peter Roff. Peter, let's shift to China. President Trump recently visited China, met with Xi Jinping, even Jimmy Lai was brought up as a topic. But overall, what does his recent trip signal about where that relationship is headed?
China is still America's frenemy. We need them, they need us, but they're not our allies. They're not our competitors. They're our frenemies. They are doing things that are objectionable. The jailing of Jimmy Lai, the resistor, who's been in solitary confinement in a Hong Kong prison for 5 years, is one example of that. The treatment of the Uyghurs, the Muslims in China, who are kept in slave conditions, is another. The unfair trade practices is a third. What President Trump realizes that most people don't realize about China is that China needs America more than America needs China. China needs the capital that flows from the United States that underwrites Chinese industrial activity. China now has a middle class that wants their stuff, to put it bluntly. And in order to have the jobs to provide them the wages to buy stuff, they need to be making goods that are sold in the United States. Trump understands that, and he's using trade as a weapon, and he is slowly grinding President Xi down to get better trade deals for the United States, to get better access to the Chinese markets and better intellectual property protections for American businesses who are operating in China. If the relationship were severed, it would be far more damaging to China than it is to the United States. It is easier for America to replace what it gets from China than it is for China to replace what it gets from America.
And is that why they're still meeting and pseudo cooperating, even though Trump has intercepted with Venezuela and Iran?
Exactly. America is needed by China. They are within the next 5 years going to have more people not working than working, because they're on retirement. It's the same crisis that America faced when the baby boomers started to retire. You can only take taxes up so high, right? Particularly now that you have a middle class. They've got to, people have to eat. They have to be able to pay rent and buy clothing and get health care. And Xi could run out without America. Xi runs out of the money he needs to run China. As much as we need the Chinese money that are buying all the American debt comes from America in the first place.
And is that why then the US President Donald Trump and probably a lot of Americans were irked by Prime Minister Carney's trip to China recently and that posturing?
Well, Prime Minister Carney thinks that Canada can fill the gap that tensions have created, the Sino-American tensions have created, and it can't. Your GNP is just not big enough. You could pick up some of the slack, but there's no way that Canada is a replacement as a trading partner for the United States. You just don't have enough people and enough money.
Mhm.
That's not a knock. That's just a fact.
Correct. 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 Okay, so in the last 20 seconds, what is the biggest opportunity for Canada with the United States right now?
I think the biggest opportunity is for Prime Minister Carney to get serious about renegotiating the trilateral trade agreement and turn North America into a free trade zone. So that we can get rid of the tariffs that we've slapped on Canada for being unhelpful, that have raised housing costs here in the United States. You ought to be able to trade goods and services across the American border with Canada like you can between Michigan and Wisconsin.
Okay. Peter, always a pleasure to have you on. Thanks for being here. And thanks for watching. This has been Counterpoint.